Welcome to the CXR channel, our premier podcast for talent acquisition and talent management. Listen in as the CXR community discusses a wide range of topics focused on attracting, engaging, and retaining the best talent. We're glad you're here.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another CXR podcast. I am Chris Hoyt, president of Career Crossroads, and your willing and able host for this show today. And if you haven't listened before, this is just a sort of an informal podcast where we invite friends and quote unquote influencers or people that we're just really interested in to talk a little bit about what's going on in the space. I'm excited about today's guest because Mark has never been on the show. So Mark, as we sort of jump right in, hello.
Hello, Chris. Thank you for having me.
How are you?
I appreciate it. I'm doing great. You know, it's good to be able to join you on the podcast. I think we talked about it maybe for the first time 6 months ago or early in the pandemic. You had mentioned the podcast. Chris and I both live in Austin, Texas. So that's how we are meeting with one another on a somewhat regular basis. And just really excited to be here with you.
Why don't you give us the escalator pitch of who you are, for those who don't know, where you work and what you do, and why might we be interested in what Mark has to say?
Sounds great. Thank you, Chris. So my escalator pitch, not elevator pitch. All right. So Mark Lobosco, my day job is I am responsible with some partners in leading LinkedIn's talent solutions business. So all of our hiring, learning, and employee engagement products. Also responsible for our global sales organization. Been with LinkedIn for 13 years, joined us when we were a little startup with big dreams and have been fortunate to be along and like to think a small contributor in the impact we've had over the following 13 years. I've had a number of different roles and love the current role that I'm in, getting a chance to connect with many of you that are hopefully listening to the podcast today. So that's what I do during the day. At night, I, father of 3 amazing children. Most of the time, my wife is out of town right now. And so I've been solo for 6 days right now. And it's hard. I have an 11-year-old daughter and twin 7-year-old boys. There's a lot going on in those little kids' lives.
I don't understand how you're even in front of the screen right now if you're running solo today.
Barely holding it together. And then, I grew up in New Jersey. I've lived here in Austin after a lot of time in the Bay Area for the past 3 years.
Nice. Yeah, we are sort of neighbors down the block because I had just moved out here, I think in June to Austin. And you were Bay Area before you were here?
Yeah, I moved, grew up in New Jersey, went to school in Colorado, moved to the Bay Area in 1999, actually early 2000. Lived there through 2018, end of 2018. We just San Francisco and then Marin County, and then we decided to moved to Austin. We had thought about it for a long time. My wife's a Texan. So if you're like another Californian ruining Texas, my wife's got some Texas roots. So that was part of the draw here in Austin.
That is an interesting migration to make because I went from Dallas to the Bay Area for a little while and then to Austin. And I'm almost embarrassed to admit, so as a Texan for 24 years prior, when someone asked me, I was looking at homes and whatever, when someone asked me where I was from, I said, well, California. And there was a lady in the back of the home that I was looking at who said, don't bring your crazy California politics here.
Yeah, the easy answer to that one is Dallas. I'm from Dallas.
Yeah, well, I just skip it now. I leave the stint in California out completely.
Yeah, don't you be Californian, my Texas. That was a show
right.
I saw yesterday. It was great.
Oh boy.
Yes.
Well, you beat the mad rush apparently too. There's already a trend of people getting here, but you got in just in time. Congrats.
Yes. Thank you.
So for anybody who maybe saw on the banners or the announcements where we were going to have the VP of Talent Solutions from LinkedIn, and you might be tuning in and thinking, what's he going to tell us about? Can we hear the next big thing? And this is kind of not that conversation. So Mark, as you know, I just kind of invited you to hear where your head's at with everything that's gone on in the space. So kind of what you're thinking, not necessarily to do any overview pitches, sneak peeks, or any of that stuff. So I just want to jump right in because we try to keep these to around 15, 20 minutes, but any big learnings or takeaways for you as we start to slowly find our new working normal, right? I don't think we found it yet, but I do think we're a lot closer than we were a year ago. Is there anything for you that sort of stands out, life lessons, or just something you see ahead?
The biggest change I see ahead, and I'll try to mix in like my personal experience, LinkedIn as a platform experience, and what everyone is probably experiencing in one degree or another, is that I believe that the pandemic will forever change, at least for the foreseeable future, a lot for how employers think about their employees and the way employees think about their employers. So what do I mean by that? And this is kind of called out quite a bit in our 10th annual Global Talent Trends Report, which if you're listening, like, oh, of course, Mark's on because they just published the report. Chris and I scheduled this months ago. It just so happened.
We truly did.
I promise. Just so happens we shared it today. But lots of good insights in the report. I'm sure Chris and Jerry will share it, and Barb in the show notes or the like. But one of the major takeaways, and this is, off of a lot of LinkedIn data points, it's us, connecting with a lot of, potentially folks that are listening to the podcast around what are some of the major trends. And one of them is around this strategic imperative with urgency to think about and potentially reinvent one's culture. And the reason that's the case is that a lot of professionals and non-professionals have come out of the pandemic, even though we're still in it in many parts of the world, and to a different degree, depending upon where you are in the US as well.
Well, yeah.
But a lot of people and professionals and non-professionals are thinking about, is the company that I work for have the same values that I have? Does the employer that I work for offer me the same type of flexibility that I have grown to love through the pandemic? Because now I can drop my kid off at school and I can pick my kid up after school. And so there is this major, a great reshuffle that is happening right now that I'm sure everyone is feeling that's listening to this call. I know even at LinkedIn, we're feeling it as well. Whereas everyone is taking stock of where they are and what they ultimately want to achieve in their career. And they're making decisions. And you have that with a backdrop where many companies are doing quite well and they've got very aggressive growth plans, and you've got attrition with a combination of growth plans. It is creating one of the more challenging recruiting environments I've certainly seen in the 10, 11 years that I've worked, in close partnership with many talent acquisition executives. So that great reshuffle that is happening right now with employees trying to determine what they ultimately want to do and who they want to work for and what type of flexibility they have. And does the company have the same set of values that they have? I think a lot of employees are thinking about that. And what it's now really top of mind for employers, at least this is what kind of popped out within the report, was restating kind of your culture, maybe re-onboarding your employees to who you are and who you aspire to be. I think this idea of workers moving around the country because employers are going to be more flexible with where their employees are, that is certainly something that started with the pandemic. And I think it's going to have a very lasting impact for all of us for years to come.
You raise a really good point, but from a cultural fit standpoint, right? People reassessing sort of if they're at their employer of choice anymore. Mm-hmm. Do you think that a lot of that is really driven by being able to sit where they want to sit to do the work? I mean, because I kind of feel like there's two camps, right? You got employers that are sort of in two camps on the extreme sides, right? You can work wherever you want. We're going all in that way. Or, you can kind of take the Jamie Dimon approach of like, you coming into work. That's it. I'm not paying you to sit at home.
Sure.
And it's funny because he gets a lot of shade for making a hardline decision that says you're coming into the office. But a lot of people worry about losing all of that talent, but I think arguably it's just a shift of culture. Yeah. Right. Because there will be people who want to come into the office and will go work for the organization, and that company's going to be just fine. It's just going to be a shift of culture.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a very important part of culture you're hitting on, Chris, but it's also maybe a more one part of it, which is more like, workplace, like where does the work get done? Are we a, remote first company? Are we a remote only company? Are we a in-office company? And I think different companies are going to choose different strategies. My guess is, companies that choose to force people to get back to the office are going to likely come up short in the war for talent, given the flexibility that employees are looking for. Now, that doesn't mean that employees are looking to be fully remote and never go back to an office. In fact, most, our own employees, they still want to work in an office if they're close to it. They just don't want to have to go every day. They want to be able to work from home 2 to 3 days a week. They want to be able to not miss, they want options. Exactly. Yeah. And so we're just seeing a lot of trends in our data and what preferences employers are putting in their things like company pages that I think companies that are going to be more flexible, again, doesn't mean everyone has to be remote, but they enable a more hybrid approach to work, and they put a little more trust in their teams and where they do their best work are those that are going to have a definitive edge in recruiting talent that is looking for that flexibility.
I don't know if it's lazy or just obvious, but the two big talking points I think that typically come up when people are deciding if they're fit at their company anymore, right? One being where can I work from? So that's one we hear about all the time, right? You have to come back to the office. I'm not coming back to the office. I was twice as productive, or, et cetera. But the other end of that we've got is the murder of George Floyd and how organizations responded to that. And there were, a number of employees who said, I don't like the way we handled this, or I don't like how we, unfortunately ignored this as an organization. So I think there's, in my bubble and the folks that I talk to, I don't think they're the only ones, but those seem to be the top two cultural fit, arguments as to whether or not they should or should not stay there. Are you seeing kind of the same thing in your space, or do you think there are other elements that are kind of we're missing them, right? They're flying under the radar, but that are just as important?
I think those are two of the most important ones, without a doubt, Chris. I mean, the report outlines a number of others. I think the other ones off the top of my head that were called out was mental well-being. So just given people are tired, they're tired through the pandemic, they're tired with the pace of work, they're tired with, homeschooling, with schools being open and being closed. So that's another one that has been, I think, called out. I think relationships with colleagues as well. Do I feel connected to someone that I care about at work is another one. But, and then comp and benefits, interestingly, is not top of the list, but it's certainly, part of it for sure.
Well, quite a few folks are making a killing in their new shifts. It'll be really interesting to see.
Yeah. But you hit on the two big ones, I think.
Well, it's funny because we had, Mark, we had a session the other day, and one of the comments that came out was we were talking about this burnout and how a lot of people are really struggling. And I think one of the chat comments on the side, one of the leaders said, I no longer work from home. I now live where I work.
Yep.
Which was it's kind of a gut punch, when you sort of think about that. And I remember back when because I've been working from home for a long time now. And I remember when I very first started working from home, it got to the point where I had to lock my office door on the weekends, or I'd walk by and be like, oh, quick email. And I'd sit down and 4 or 5 hours would go by. So it's kind of been an interesting piece of that. How have you managed that? Have the kids sort of kept you, do they pull you out? I mean, how do you keep your head straight?
It's a good question. And I'm speaking from a place of being fortunate with some privilege, where when we moved here, we don't have an office in Austin. So when we first moved here, there was it was like a mini little office in the house, but it was more like a closet with a small window. So I was like, there's my office. And so
who needs the broom? Do they knock on your office?
Yeah, more or less. It was I think it was framed as a library too, but it was not very big, sliding door. But that was before COVID. And I was like, all right, I'm going to be traveling a fair amount. Kids are going to be gone. And then when lockdown first happened, I think I was in the closet, broom shelter for about 4 months, when I looked outside and there's this old storage shed we have in the backyard. And I'm like,
oh no,
that's the office. So we redid this here former shed into my office.
So you're in a kind of an office casita.
Yeah, casita. Some people call it the he shed from the.
I like it.
My he shed. But yeah, we did this. Obviously, air conditioner, which you need, and heater. I've learned in January sometimes. So I've been able to, all kidding aside, create that kind of space, which I need. So I go to the office, I like drop my kids off at school, come in, say goodbye to my wife, walk across the yard, and I come in here. And I leave my laptop in here. And so I try to create a little space that way. But I am by no means perfect in that area, despite trying to deploy the right atomic habits to create that space. But I slip up, like I'm sure you do too.
Well, yeah, I mean, we take the little screen right with us everywhere we go,
Yeah.
but I have found it's awfully helpful to sort of just shut the door in the office, when you're not supposed to be working, but you're already.
Chris, come in. I know it's calling you. It's calling you.
Yeah, it is. It's just a nagging, pulling. Yeah.
Yeah, and I try to model. Obviously, leading a team. I try to model the behavior that I think is sustainable, like for my team and also the org overall. And so I'll go like out of my way to, try to model that. Whereas, the work feels like it's never ending right now. And so that's another big part of it as well.
Nice. Well, look, Mark, take us out with one tip. If you had it you deal with a lot of TA leaders from around the world. Have you heard one tip, one piece of advice for sort of leading people and staying sane as we move into whatever our future normal is? Is there anything you would share? It can be your own, or it can be, you can shamelessly steal it from somebody else, but just something that sort of resonated with you as powerful that you'd want to pass forward.
I don't think it has to do with TA in particular. I think it has to do just for any leader who's leading a large org, or it doesn't even have to be a large org, which is, we cast long shadows as leaders. And so, my previous comments, I didn't know you were going to ask me this question to end, I think is related to that. And there's no shortage of work. It's probably been one of the hardest times to ever work in recruiting, given coming back from a function that was materially impacted when COVID first happened, with layoffs across the TA industry. And then all of these like incremental headcount asks being approved, and then you throw in attrition. Like our teams are stretched and stressed. And so, the thing I would recommend is it's your job to help ensure the team does not burn out and fry. So whether that's creating space in staff meetings to, bring a little levity to things, doing things to just bring recognition or joy to your teams, whether it's you or asking your boss's boss to like reach out to someone on the team who's doing a remarkable job. I think it's just making sure you're creating the space to think about your team and how you ensure you're looking after them. And then your team will do that with their team and vice versa.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I think we had another discussion earlier this morning, and one of the leaders said making sure that they purposefully carve out time for the interactions that are lost in an office, right? Yeah. That organically occur. So to really map those out and make sure that those, make those happen with your team. I love it. Mark, awesome, potentially, essentially neighbor to see you. Odd to dial into you when you're just down the road a ways, but it's fantastic. I'm really glad you gave us the time today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. Look forward to connecting soon at Mozart's for our quarterly date. And thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the CXR channel. Please subscribe to CXR on your favorite podcast resource and leave us a review while you're at it. Learn more about CXR at our website, cxr.works, facebook.com and twitter.com/careercrossroads, and on Instagram @careerxroads. We'll catch you next time.